Also, there was a lot of backlash. Like I had thousands and thousands of tweets, with people saying very harsh things.
Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in today to the Driven to Better podcast, where everyone you'll hear is driven to make business better. I am your host, Justin Sisley, and on the show today is Caleb Brown of HandmadeTea.com. Join us as we find out who Handmade Tea's famous investor is, why a laundry quarter delivery service failed, and how Caleb managed to get his first customers. Stay tuned, we've got a great show ahead. I'm here today with Caleb Brown from HandmadeTea.com. How you doing today, Caleb?
Very good, very good. Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Oh, thank you for joining us on the show. It's going to be a blast. I was talking to you a little bit already before the interview, and you got a nice mic. We got good taste in mics.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, same mic. That's awesome.
Yeah, so those listening, if you're looking to start a podcast or do any voice work, the Yeti by Blue Microphones is awesome.
Yep. It really is.
Caleb, why don't you tell us a little bit about you personally, when you decided to become an entrepreneur and kind of how long ago that was?
Sure, absolutely. So I went to college for computer information systems, kind of always have kind of done the tech thing. Got a job working for, probably a lot of listeners will know, Gary Vaynerchuk. I got a job working for Gary Vaynerchuk right after college, doing web development for VaynerMedia in New York City. And I loved it, and I learned a lot. And kind of just being around Gary, but also a lot of other inspiring folks, his brother AJ being one of them, but about 1 million other people that I met in New York, kind of really geared me up for, still wanting to stay technical. I still, write software probably close to every day. But kind of became way more interested in the business side, right? And so about 2 years into being at VaynerMedia, I kind of had this idea, or a little bit before 2 years, of I've always been a loose leaf tea drinker, been big into tea, and never in my life kind of before that imagined owning any kind of business or doing anything that had to do with tea. But I was getting into kind of culinary art stuff as well. I'm not a great cook, but I enjoy it. And I was just kind of very uninspired by a lot of tea blends out there. I could find really high quality, solid teas that were just tea. But when it came to tea blends, everything was just a little boring and a little kind of bad, and it got a bad rap. And at the time, rightfully so. But I kind of thought that there would be a way to make tea blends that were actually decent. And so I was, I kind of wanted a sort of a career or life change or something. Even though I had an amazing time and absolute blast at VaynerMedia, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. And so I started kind of kicking around this idea for Handmade Tea, and really actually raised a little bit of money and started doing that. And this would have been 2011. So prior to that, I had built other things. Like I have a couple of websites that are kind of educational focused, but they started in just me being a guy that liked to create things, and there was no business vision. And so they didn't even start actually as educational products. They started as just products, and sort of accidentally fell into the educational world. Teachers just started happening to use this software I built in particular called Squirrel. Squirrel.com. It was never positioned as an educational product until it just sort of picked up. So I'd already done, I'd already kind of like built stuff and put it out there. But Handmade Tea was the first time I was like, oh, okay, business is cool, business is fun. And that's really where it started. And the funny thing is just even getting that kind of taste for starting, Handmade Tea, and we can certainly dive into the beginnings of that. But even doing that, I've since gone back and worked on Squirrel and came at it with more of this, kind of this business angle rather than just being, a guy that makes websites and makes web apps, actually started, building up. I actually do marketing and things like that to some level for that now. So it's kind of been fun to revisit stuff I did in the past and kind of come back in with, not that I'm this amazing business guy or anything, but come back with a much better grasp on that world than I had, years prior.
Yeah, looking at it with the eyes of experience now instead
Right.
of it being your first project.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to nerd out a little bit because I
Let's
didn't
do
know
it.
that you worked for Gary Vee.
Yes, yes, yes. So I was doing web development. So I mean, so at the time, VaynerMedia was super small. I think I was something like the 11th employee
Okay.
at VaynerMedia, and so back then they were, they're a little bit different now. Back then, we were actually doing like WordPress websites for folks, but we were still building a lot of like social. We did a lot with the Facebook pages back in the day, and even Twitter stuff and. I wasn't involved in this. I don't believe, not that directly anyway. But they were one of the first that did some Instagram integration, like when the API became available on Instagram. So yeah, a lot of I was doing web development, but very obviously because it's Gary and it's because it's VaynerMedia, very in the social space.
Yeah, yeah. Now this must have been then after Wine Library TV blew up then.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so I had met, I think it was through like Kevin Rose of Dig, of just following him, that I learned about Gary when I was still in college. So this would have been like 2008, maybe. I graduated in 2009, but I think it was prior to that. And I actually drove. I was 30 miles south of Pittsburgh, where I was going to college, and actually drove up to some very small random bookstore. In Ohio, probably a 6-hour drive, because Gary was doing a book signing for his first book, which was a wine book. And I had just, basically through just seeing him from Kevin Rose stuff, I knew that he was, seemed to be a cool dude. And that's also when I was very into tea at the time, but never had at the time had thought I was going to do any kind of tea company. But the wine stuff, kind of hit home, because that's when I would taste the tea and drink tea, and at the time beer as well. I was thinking about it. I was thinking about the flavors and talking to people about not being too tea nerdy, but caring about the flavor. And Gary was kind of one of the first people that did that in a way that wasn't just like the old school version of wine reviews. So I was that's what we met at this book signing, and I basically hit him up then once I graduated about a year later, and went up to VaynerMedia.
Wow, that's a great story. That's awesome. I mean, he's one of the. He's got to be top 1% of media people out there.
A million percent. Yeah, he's a great guy, and he actually he invested in Handmade Tea when
Really?
I basically quit VaynerMedia and asked him to invest in Handmade Tea basically in the same breath. And he's an amazing guy. He did it, and he's great.
Well, that reflects really well on you too, because how many bosses will get that request? Be like, I'm quitting. By the way, when I leave, can I have a bunch of money? And they say yes.
Yeah. That was I tell people that story a lot, and it seems unlikely, but no, it happened. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Well, it seems like we're kind of naturally transitioning into it. So, kind of give us the origin story then. What made you decide? This is it. Handmade Tea is where I'm going. I'm going to quit my job.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I would have done it regardless of raising money. I didn't raise a ton of money or anything, but I would have done it regardless. I think it was actually just being. I think I would have gone about it at the time I was, I'm 28 now. I'm trying to think how old I was then, but I was younger, obviously, because it was in the past. I don't know if it's the way that I would have gone about it now. I think I would have been, I think I would have done it more as a side project at first. Probably not tried to raise any money, although that part did work out. But I think just being younger and being like, well, like I said, being around these amazing, really inspirational people for 2-ish years, I just went for it, and there wasn't a ton of risk, right? I mean, if it failed, then I would just go, get another job, and which I actually had. There was a period where I became a software developer again, and did kind of put Handmade Tea. I still put a lot of focus into the blends that I put out, but did then transition to from a full-time gig to a sort of nights and weekends kind of thing. But I knew that I had enough runway, even just personally, but especially with raising money, I had enough runway that I could kind of put it out there. I could do a couple of blends, build it up, and sort of see, if it stuck. And I'll tell you, I mean, it actually did grow pretty slowly. I mean, I learned a lot about all of this, and kind of moving forward, and sort of like back then, I didn't even put in it's common sense, but I didn't put that much effort into things like, like the holiday season or the various holidays throughout the year. And now, I mean, December is just insane for handmade tea. I mean, it's like 6x a regular month, maybe actually probably more this year. But back then, I wasn't even, in the game enough to really know how to position myself for things like that really mattered, like the holidays and things.
Yeah. You mentioned raising money. Was there other investors besides Gary? Did you actually raise like a formal round, or friends and family?
I didn't. I mean, it was pretty much solely, some money that I had and Gary's investment. This was, I haven't raised any money for anything post that, and this was, before AngelList and stuff like that. And, even now, if I was to go raise money, it's, even though I've kind of, been around a little bit, it's still kind of intimidating,
It is.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, we had, on the show, we had Josh from Tagler.com kind of shared a little bit about going out and trying to find investors, and he actually kind of fell into it. It was somebody
Sure.
he already knew who he wasn't even thinking about asking investing.
Okay, yeah.
Just kind of mentioned it in passing and got the investment. So it's amazing to hear you work really hard on polishing that pitch and making sure you got all your bases covered, and then
Right.
that investment can actually come out of nowhere. Somebody you're not even pitching.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
that
Super
was
true.
that's episode 11. If anybody wants to go back and listen to that, but that's
I did see you post that. I need to catch up on that.
Yeah, I appreciate you going back and listening to other people
Absolutely.
too. So that's all very successful stuff, very good stuff. But I like to learn a lot, and I think other people are probably with me on this from other people's failures. Is there a
For sure.
time, coming through from 2011 till now when something you've tried either with Handmade Tea or Squirrel or maybe another business venture just has fallen on its face?
Absolutely. So one thing that comes to mind, a thing that I did, and this actually doesn't, this isn't of anything that we've mentioned of anything like Squirrel, Handmade Tea or anything, but a buddy of mine, this actually you may have even heard of this. A buddy of mine, Sean Chapman, who's an amazing guy. We had, he and I both, we went to college together. He's now out in Mountain View, California. But he and I both kind of do our thing where we have our moleskins, and we just write down. Or actually, I use Mod notebooks, and I think they're amazing. I think they're better than Moleskine. If anyone wants to look them up, it's from a company called Need One. I think they make good stuff. But anyway, I'm not an investor or anything. I just like.
All right, we'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's a good product. But anyway, so we both kind of, as they come to us, write down ideas, and every once in a while we'll, because we're 3,000 miles apart, but we still work on stuff together. We'll Skype or call each other or whatever, and and talk about the stuff that we've been, kind of thinking about lately. This is a while ago, but he and I both had written down totally independently. We had written down quarter delivery service, because in every apartment that both he and I have had since college, we've had a laundry machine, a coin-operated laundry machine on premise, like in the basement or whatever, but no, because it's a small apartment building, no like coin machine there. And so now, like, I use Simple Bank, like I don't have a physical bank. I pretty much don't go to the bank, and I was finding that the only reason I was to get quarters to do laundry, and that wasn't a pleasant experience. You had to stand in line, and they had to, make sure you had an account there, and all that stuff, and then you had to put these giant quarters in your pocket, which I know is a first world problem. But so we're like, wait a second, would we pay to have quarters delivered to us every month? And the answer for both of us was absolutely. So we built this thing called Washboard. It's Washboard.co. And that's exactly what we did. For $15.95 a month, we'd send you $10 worth of quarters. Or for $26.95, we'd send you 20. And of course, a lot of that, because quarters are heavy, a lot of that was in shipping. But I put it on Product Hunt, and that was about all I did. This would have been in the summer. This would have been like maybe July. it actually kind of like started to blow up to the point that within maybe 12-ish hours or so, it was on NPR, Time Magazine, Gawker picked it up. I did like a New York Times interview, but they wouldn't post it because the Gawker interview was basically like, Gawker posted it first, and they didn't want to post an article that was so similar to Gawker's. So unfortunately, that one I gave the interview, but it wasn't released, unfortunately. And we actually ended with 41 customers, but we were using Stripe, and the banks caught on. And I never thought this would be a terms of service violation, but essentially they were afraid they had a problem with using money to buy money. Essentially, was the problem. I don't know if that's a money laundering thing or what. So that shut down, but also there was a lot of backlash. Like I had thousands and thousands of tweets, with people saying very harsh things, which I mean, that's okay. I mean, I get that it's a dumb product, you know what I mean? But the funny thing is, like, I think that maybe they thought, like, I thought this was like a genius idea, whereas really, it was just like a sort of a, I knew that it was going to get picked up. That being said, I did like I would personally use Washboard. I really would. Yeah. But I know, no, I didn't think that I was going to like retire at 30 because of Washboard and be on an island or anything. Like I didn't think there was going to be like the next Uber. That's certainly not true. But I just it was more of an experiment. I like launching things. I like doing things, but. So we found a couple of different ways for what, all of the articles that were written about it were negative. And all of the tweets that I received were certainly negative. So, I mean, I actually personally don't really rate that up as a failure. But it probably is. It probably was.
So everybody out there listening, trying to create a business where you trade money for different forms of money is apparently not
at least
legal.
By Stripe. I mean, I reached out. I actually found a credit card processor that would have done it. The rates weren't that good, and it was just then their API was terrible versus Stripe's being amazing. So it wasn't really that worth it. But yeah, I mean, you can't do that with like Stripe or with any of the big like startup ones like Stripe or Curly. Any of those guys. That's a violation of pretty much all of those guys, which I didn't know at the time.
Yeah, that it just seems kind of ridiculous that you cannot pay for other money.
Exactly, and I guess like even you couldn't use them if you're doing like some kind of a Bitcoin service that did that. I suppose any kind of currency is off limits. I from what I understand from learning that the hard way.
Well, I'm sure the lawyers have their reasoning.
Sure, no,
as
absolutely.
Much as we can't figure it out.
There must be. I mean, yeah. But I mean, real quick, also under the same umbrella, there's educational stuff with Squirrel, which does very well. There's, I mean, it's not insane, but there's about 53,000 registered educators for Squirrel, and it does well. It gets a lot of views and things like that, and it has a free model. Yes,
I have 25 Twitter followers, and you're saying 53,000 registered users. It's okay.
Well, I'll tell you, I've listened to. No, I mean, not a ton. I really do need to go back, but I've listened to about 3 of the podcasts. I think you do a great job, and I think that number is absolutely going to rise. And that's like when I reached out to you via Reddit, but I was kind of looking at your stuff. I think the stuff you're putting out is really good. So I definitely think that number. I definitely think that number is going up.
I appreciate it. I hope so.
Absolutely. But no, so I also did this thing. I really put like a lot of work behind it. Another educational product. Which it was sort of this hunch. I'm not a teacher, right? But I had this hunch that teachers would want this the simple one-page website. And I call it Otter. All of them have little animal names for whatever reason. And, basically it's just a super simple way for teachers to put out like announcements and alerts and even have a little classroom calendar and stuff. And from the success of Squirrel, I mean, I thought Otter was going to absolutely blow up. And so I put like a solid like couple of months into getting the first version, the prototype out. And I mean, I did put it out on a couple places on Reddit, and I actually think this was pre-Product Hunt, which is pretty much one of the the only. I mean, I still read Y Combinator and things, but Product Hunt, I probably check Product Hunt before I read my email in the morning. But it just didn't really pick up. We have signups, but maybe like I sign up a day. So it just never really did it. But one thing I did learn from that, so I mean, I do consider that a failure. But one thing that I did learn from that is I was basing it too much on a hunch. And granted, that can work. I mean, Squirrel was originally a hunch. But what I've done since then is started talking more. I mean, I do talk to my users all the time, but customers of Squirrel, I started talking to them more after I saw Otter, me expecting it to blow up and it absolutely not blowing up. I started talking to folks a little bit more. And so the kind of the direction that I have gone with that stuff is really just based a lot more on the teachers' ideas and needs, and they're the customers. That's where it should be, versus my hunches.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a great point, and it's something that a lot of people need to learn. A lot of people learn it the hard way. A lot of people have that build it and they will come mentality.
Absolutely,
that's not really how it works. It's build a very minimum product and then see if anybody wants to use it at all before you put in more work.
1,000,000%.
So, yeah, it's very, very. I'm very big on validating business ideas before putting in, anything more than maybe even a couple hours into something.
For sure.
Make a landing page and stop, and then make sure that people want it.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, so now, kind of get us into maybe more of the nitty gritty. I'm interested in handmade tea. Mm-hmm. So, who's your target market? I mean, is it foodies pretty much?
Primarily, yeah. I've found a good base with kind of just existing, tea drinkers. Steepster is a big tea review website. And in fact, they have what is essentially a competing product, Steepster Select, which is a good product. They give you somewhere around 5 different teas, loose leaf teas a month, and they do a good job. They do. But I have found there's a good community already on Steepster. So I've actually, I've had folks kind of review stuff on Steepster, handmade tea products on Steepster, and people, on Steepster kind of check those out, read those, and sign up through there. Are they necessarily foodies? Some may be, but, pretty much I do have a set of, folks that came in just really, really, really liking tea. But I have had people that kind of want to get into tea and were perhaps more on the foodie side and sort of wanted to learn about tea and just kind of found us generally through I don't do a ton of SEO stuff, but Google does well for us. And I say us, meaning me. That's a problem I have. I always say everything's us, and it's definitely just me. I don't know if I would, even though the website says, monthly tea subscription for foodies, I don't know how much I target that kind of foodie, although, it does make sense. I am trying to use bizarre ingredients. When I started out, I'm a big beer fan. I liked what Dogfish Head was doing, and they were using, weird ingredients, but all the ingredients kind of made sense. They were actually doing it for the flavor versus just doing something weird to kind of say that they did something weird. And so in the early days, I sort of did describe it as Dogfish Head for tea. I for whatever reason, I don't do that as much. I don't know if I just don't believe it as much or what. But existing tea drinkers do seem to be the biggest target, and they're not necessarily foodies, though.
Okay. Well, if you haven't already, episode 2, I keep plugging my own show. This is ridiculous.
That's all right.
But episode 2 was with Mobcraft Beer, and I am such a huge fan of those guys and their concept, and their beer is fantastic.
That was the first episode that I listened to before today. Their concept's so great. I love them. I haven't checked out their beers yet, but I'm going to.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
They seemed really, really great. I mentioned that to you in an email. I really like their motto. I think it's awesome. Yeah,
it's fantastic stuff. So how did you bring on board those first customers then for Handmade Tea? What was your strategy?
So what I did was when I was still at VaynerMedia at the time, I started focusing more on talking about tea. I started a Tumblr, but also even on my personal Twitter, was talking about tea more often, was engaging in the community, and not talking about handmade tea, just talking about tea in general. And I was blogging about where I thought the tea industry was going and things like that. So they weren't specifically, handmade tea posts or anything like that. In fact, I don't even think I had announced it, or maybe it was a while ago now, but I don't even know that I was 100% sure I was going to do it. I just knew that was I did want to kind of experiment in that industry, the tea industry, a little bit. So I kind of built up, a little bit of a following that way of doing this tea blog, of really just kind of reaching out to other folks that were blogging and talking about tea. Twitter was great for that. And then I did kind of announce it, and I did do just a super simple landing page like we were kind of talking about earlier. That was pretty much like, I probably have pictures of it somewhere. What used to be just handmadetea.com is what it would land on. But like a 1 or 2 sentence concept, of what Handmade Tea was going to be, and then a MailChimp, thing to sign up and learn more once we launched. So I don't remember the exact number. We launched in October 2011. I want to say it wasn't insane. It started with, 25 maybe subscribers, somewhere around that, for the first blend. So that was good because, I thought that was a pretty solid number to launch with, but it was also an easy number to start with. Like I said, I was, with the exception of Gary, kind of, getting advice from Gary and things like that. I was the one that was, putting all of this together and everything. So that was like, it was a good way to start, to launch, but also a number that I felt pretty solid, enough that I felt like we're getting off to a good start.
Where are you now? If you can you share kind of how many?
Yeah, absolutely. You have now? And it's still, it's the numbers aren't insane. The numbers are pretty modest, but I sent in February. I sent out I want to say 256 packages. And that's there's actually, when it launched, there was only one plan. There was the $19.95 a month 3-ounce package of tea. I didn't even have gift subscriptions back when I launched. And now you can there's a mini. So one thing I learned from talking to customers, a lot of these folks, there's some people that only drink handmade tea, which is, I love it. That's awesome. But there's a lot of folks, the majority of folks are still trying different things. They're still drinking other teas. And so basically when someone would cancel and I'd sort of, reach out, what I was hearing a lot was, I just have too much tea. There's too much tea in my cabinet, So that's when I introduced the mini subscription, which is exactly half for $12.95. It's 1.5 ounces of tea. And that actually, within the last 6 months, that is actually the most popular subscription. And then there are gift options as well. You buy 3-6 months of tea at a time. And
you said it's just you. So you're the sole operator of this business.
That's correct, yeah.
Well, it sounds, to me, that sounds perfect. 200 boxes a month seems like it's probably manageable.
It's manageable. It's a nice it's a nice point. My margins are pretty good. I love working with people. I do. This has just kind of been one of those things where it was sort of my experiment rather, when I launched it. And sure, like I said, I got advice and things like that from Gary and everything. But it was always just kind of very manageable on my end. And sure, someone that would have more business experience I could absolutely benefit from. I'm not saying that I'm just totally rocking it on my own. Like there are people that would be beneficial to it, but it's allowed me to do a lot of experiments, in general, kind of learning about stuff, testing stuff, and so it's kind of been a good little business that sort of also acted a little bit as a sandbox for experimenting with sort of other things I was curious about and what worked and what didn't. Just now I'm getting into sort of playing with the website a little bit and doing some A/B testing on just different layouts and different word choices and headlines and stuff. But it honestly is. It's a good size for being just me.
Yeah. And is it something you want to blow up? Do you want it to get huge, or is it one of those businesses you kind of want to keep in the comfortable range where you're not pushing real hard to become the next Uber? Sure.
Like I said, I'm happy with it being this modest level, and it's doing well. I don't think I would ever say that I didn't want something I did to blow up. As far as I can think, I think, okay. And I think right now my time is sort of, most of my time is put on Handmade Tea, but like I said, I'm still a developer. I'll do freelance and consulting projects every once in a while. And then I really do put a lot of time into the educational stuff. Like I'm working on a new product right now. And that's, like I said, from stuff that I've learned from actually talking to folks rather than basing it totally 100% on my hunches. But I'm always looking to grow it. like I said, right now I'm sort of starting, using tools to sort of grow it, and I'm always happy when more people sign up. So there's no point where I'd want to limit any kind of growth.
So let me ask you this. I've asked it in a couple interviews, and I kind of stopped for a while, but I'm going to bring this question back.
Sure.
Given a $100,000 windfall, it's not debt, it's not equity. You just kind of come into it. What would you spend it on in the business?
That's a great question. I probably would experiment with the marketing that I've done has been pretty little. I did, I've done some Reddit ads and some Google AdSense stuff and Facebook stuff, mostly in December, kind of around the holidays. I probably would experiment with a little bit bigger budgets and get a better sense of the data that came back from that. I'd probably do a little bit of fun stuff too. Like there's so obviously, Handmade Tea, everything with a monthly subscription period, you have a fixed amount, right? So you're paying $12.95 a month for the mini or $19.95 a month for the large. So there's a range of what I can spend on ingredients and tea. That obviously still makes margin, right? I kind of want to experiment with doing some weirder stuff that's outside of a subscription. Like I always kind of wanted to do a tea that was sort of like intentionally over the top that still tasted delicious. Like I sort of really want to do a tea that like has saffron in it and like black truffle and like gold leaves and is like $40 an ounce and something insane. I would maybe, spend a little bit of money just to do that sort of for fun. And I think you in the maybe not, super huge, but I think you would get a certain amount of press, not just doing it for a gimmick. I mean, I wouldn't put out a tea that didn't taste good, but I do think it would be a fun thing to do and sort of silly thing to do, but in a good way. I would maybe experiment with something like that. Or I would just give myself kind of a bigger budget to play with these different tools. I'll tell you one thing. I do try to save money in the business, and OLARC, which is the live chat on the website. I knew it was a good idea, and I just avoided. And it's only like $16 a month, but I just avoided paying it for so long. And then around the holidays, I was like, nah, I got to do it. I got to put it in there. It has paid for itself like 3 times over. Like if someone can land on your site, especially if they're comparing different sites, different tea sites, and they land there and they can actually talk to me. And my sleeping schedule is insane, so people will hit me up at like 3 a.m. and I'm there. And that works. Like they're like, oh, I'm just stopping by because I'm comparing these 2 sites, and with me being able to chat with them in real time, if they say that sentence, I know that's going to be a sale.
Okay.
There's probably other things that I could be doing better, like the email triggering stuff that's happening that people are getting real big into. And I'm blanking on the names, but where a user or a customer gets to a certain point, and then maybe stops the process that you want, and you follow up with email kind of in an automated way.
Yeah.
I don't do any of that stuff, and that's I'd probably budget for just kind of integrating more tools and tracking them and seeing what worked.
Okay. I'm curious, how'd the Reddit ads work out for you?
You know, it's interesting. So I Reddit. So I did, like I said, I did Facebook, Google AdSense, and Reddit over in December, as much time as I could get in December. And it seemed like, from everything I could track, Reddit did the best in December. So based on that data, I then scheduled kind of a more so that was totally holiday specific, buy this for a gift. And then I kind of took that and I was like, oh, okay, Reddit did really well. I'm going to, get the chunk of January and kind of run the more traditional, sign up for the monthly Handmade Tea. Did really bad, did pretty poorly.
Okay.
So I'm still kind of digesting that and figuring that out. But so it did amazing in December and real bad, not real bad, but it was like a sale or 2. And so, I mean, I lost money in January. Their ads are very affordable, so it wasn't a ton. It was, it's good to learn. But mixed reviews on that. I mean, a good experience. I actually think that their setup's kind of nice for whatever reason. But it's because they give you the least amount of data, but for whatever reason, I like it the best. But yeah, so that was a route that I only started to explore in early December.
Okay. Well, Caleb, I want to be respectful of your time, and so we'll probably move into the last couple of questions here. Some recommendations that hopefully people listening can learn from to get to a spot where you are. I mean, it sounds like you're in a great spot right now. You're in a spot that a lot of entrepreneurs want to be, and I'm a little envious of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's start out by saying, and I might already know the answer to this, but somebody who has kind of inspired you, been a role model through your entrepreneurial journey.
Yep. I mean, so you're right. We did talk about Gary. I mean, that was a big, Gary Vaynerchuk was a big, sort of probably my transition from being strictly a technical guy into, caring about business. I really like Mark Cuban. I think that he's an inspiring guy. I mean, Shark Tank kind of gets made fun of, but I actually think Shark Tank, granted, some of the valuations are weird and things like that, but I think that anytime you can put, and this is Damon John, any of the investors on Shark Tank, I really do think that anytime you can put like the idea of innovation, even if it's for, silly, as seen on TV products, into the homes of all of America, like especially, I mean, kids are watching it and everything. I think that's ultimately a good thing, even if it's sort of gimmicky and sort of silly. And, I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs trash it, like I said, because of, the valuations that they give and things like that. But ultimately, I think it's a good thing. I mean, that being said, even Gary, when asked this question, says that he doesn't have any. And I think there's something to that, you can be inspired by someone. You can certainly learn from someone. I absolutely learned from Gary and his brother AJ. But I do think that there's a level of being, kind of doing your own thing and being your own person, and you shouldn't base anything off, you shouldn't just be like, oh, okay, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to clone Elon Musk, You probably shouldn't do that. You should probably be your own person, but learn from other folks. But
definitely.
And that being said, Elon Musk is amazing. So
he's been brought up. I think probably 25% of the people.
I absolutely believe that. Yeah,
have mentioned Elon Musk. So that's perfect. And then what about a book? Something you've read that you feel inspired you or helped you a lot? Absolutely.
I'll tell you, I probably don't read as much as I should, and that's because every time I pick up something and start reading it, then I get really inspired, and then I go work and I stop reading the book. But I guess that's ultimately a good thing, right? But someone recommended this to me years ago, and I picked it up. It's the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, and it's from like the early 90s. But I guess it has stood true because I review and go back to that book quite often, a couple times a year, even just like certain chapters, or when I'm going through the process of like starting something new and kind of vetting an idea. That's a book I'll go back to, and I think I bought that book for under $1 because it's just been published so long and so many times. The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing is pretty solid, especially from a guy that I don't have a marketing background. I'm not a marketing guy. I did find that book pretty darn helpful.
I'm looking at it on Amazon right now, used and new from 1 cent. So I would imagine there's some shipping in there, so it might cost a little bit, but not terrible.
Not terrible.
Right. Hey everyone, I want to break in quickly to thank one of our partners on the show, Audible.com. For the listeners of the Driven to Better podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Between my full-time job, a side gig, and this podcast, I just can't find the time to sit down and read. That's where an audiobook comes in. It's the perfect solution for a busy schedule. Now, time spent driving, working out, or running errands is time spent learning with an audiobook. Head to driventobetter.com/book today and get your free audio version of the book we just talked about or any other book you want. Again, that's driventobetter.com/book. All right, back to this awesome interview. And then what about a business resource, something you find yourself using a lot, maybe every day with Handmade Tea or Squirrel?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll tell you, like I said, I check out Product Hunt a lot, and that, granted, you'll see the stuff that has no business helping out a business, like, a thing that makes pictures out of emoji and things like that. But there are a lot of these, sort of these newer tools, like I said, the email triggering stuff. You'll see a lot of that on Product Hunt. And the same, like I only semi-recently started checking out the startup and small business and entrepreneur section of Reddit. And of course, that's why we're here right now, right? So that kind of stuff is helpful, and I think that the community, I wish the community was a little bit bigger. I was surprised that, certain things in there on like the entrepreneur and startup section, only had a couple comments. I think that's interesting. I expect it to be, much larger. Like I said, as a specific like tool, I think if you sell anything online, it's going to be worth doing the online chat, the OLARC or whatever, because like I said, I try to not spend that much, and I didn't even want to spend the $16 a month. And I can tell you I certainly made more than $16 a month, like this month, just from sales that came from chat. So that's my favorite tool that's been out in a little bit.
So what happens if you're not there? Do you just turn it off when you're not able to chat?
Yes, which does. Like I actually tweeted them. I wish there was a thing that could sense the pressure in my chair and take me offline when I wasn't sitting down at my office chair, because that sucks when you forget about it and you leave yourself online and someone comes back and you saw that someone was like, hey, I have a question about the tea, and you didn't respond. Like that's the worst feeling, because then there's no way to follow up with you. You didn't get their email or anything, and they think that it's a bad experience for them because they thought you were there and you're not. So I keep it up on a tab. Like, I mean, it's actually I should be offline because I wouldn't. I'm doing this podcast and I wouldn't chat, but I'm online right now. I see the green thing, so I
promise I won't write you anything right now.
right. But it has. I've done it long enough now that it is like a habit or a process that when I get up, I do set it to offline mode. But yeah, you just have the chat up in a window pretty much all day for me.
And then finally, just kind of a piece of guidance you can offer to somebody who's maybe just starting out or hasn't even started yet. Maybe they're still where you were with VaynerMedia.
For sure. Well, like I said, I probably would. I don't regret it. I mean, there's no point in regretting anything, right? Because it already happened, so you can't change it. All you can do is learn from it. But had Handmade Tea not existed, and I was thinking about starting Handmade Tea today, and if I had like a full-time job or whatever, I would have probably launched it more on the side, because it would have been, I could have handled that nights and weekends, and I probably wouldn't truthfully have gone and looked for any kind of funding, and I would have let it grow to the point that I was like, okay, I'm going to leave or whatever. Maybe depending on the idea, maybe that won't happen. But also, like we touched on, it's okay to put a couple hours into an idea and do things to validate it. And you can do that with stuff like LaunchRock and just like, if you know a little bit of HTML or whatever, and just put, a MailChimp, email collect embed right in there and kind of launch and try to validate an idea using, whatever, whether you put it just out on Twitter or on one of these Reddit sites, Product Hunt to kind of validate it. I mean, that being said, personally, I've had a little bit of a success with just going ahead and launching something. But if I was to really do it right now, I probably would go the route of trying to, do away the kind of validate it in a much quicker way. Than fully building it out. But just try stuff, just put it out there,
Yeah. It's getting easier and easier with all the technology available.
It's way easier in 2015 than it was even in 2010,
Yeah, definitely. Well, Caleb, plug what you want to plug. Plug your website if you want to give your social media out, if people want to get in touch with you. Do that, sure. and then we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, I'm Caleb Brown on Twitter with 1B, CALEBROWN, handmadetea.com for monthly loose leaf tea, and Scurry Labs for kind of the smorgasbord of educational software that I put out.
Sounds good.
That's everything.
All right, Caleb, I'm blown away by the amount of value you brought to this interview. So thank you
awesome.
so much for being
man.
here.
This is fun. Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, definitely. We might have you back again just to talk about, all the other projects you've worked on, Squirrel and everything else. So,
but absolutely do that.
Thanks again, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for joining us. Remember to head over to driventobetter.com and check out the show notes where we'll have everything we talked about here today. Don't forget, you can get a free audio version of our guest's recommended book or any other book you like from audible.com by clicking on the link in the show notes. While you're there, I'd also encourage you to check out the DTB Plus Club for exclusive access to premium content. It's totally free, so go to the website for more details. Thanks again. Catch you on the next show.